Five.
Curry hits a three.
Four.
Just for the try. Deep left field.
Three.
Patrick hit by Watt. Sack number 10.
Two.
Messi with a record-breaking goal.
One.
Welcome to BSS Sports. Now, here are your hosts, Steve and Trevor.
Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of BSS Sports. My name is Steve Schill with the ever-lovely Trevor Struthers. And the Grey Cup was on yesterday, and of course the nation is torn whether to pay attention to this game or not, because it's 3 downs instead of 4. We'll get to NFL in just a bit. But I guess before we talk about the game itself, I have questions about the way the TSN handled the pre-game everything. So, as the players came out, they decided to put the video camera on them, and that's totally fine and cool, but they also decided to leave the audio on, and a couple of MFers dropped repeatedly, and if you went on social media, you could find some quite harsh comments saying how that was completely inappropriate. Do you think TSN had totally dropped the ball on the PG-13?
Maybe they have, but yeah, I don't know if you can have like somebody on a switch to like drop the audio, because it's like they have that slight delay. I mean, on live TV for a reason, so you could like drop the audio or something when something like that occurs. But yeah, I mean, as long as like you have somebody talking on like a studio talking about something, and you're showing like the players just to show them, you don't need the audio on. Maybe helps, but you never know what they're going to say, you know, especially if they're not too aware that they're on live television.
So the Toronto Argonauts won in the game at 27-24, holding the Stampeders to a whopping 0 in the fourth quarter and scoring 11. Basically, at the very end, Bo Levi Mitchell decided, you know what? Instead of kicking it to tie it, we're going to throw it to a receiver in double coverage, and it kind of reminded me of the Seahawks not running the ball.
Yeah, I mean, basically it was an unneeded attempt of trying to win the football game. They were basically already in field goal range. I mean, that's the thing they could have tied that football game if, you know, they had ran the football one more time or something, or, you know, even maybe a short pass and you see where that leads. But, yeah, I mean, they shot for the end zone, and Bo Levi Mitchell hadn't thrown an interception in the game yet. He had played in 2 prior Grey Cups, including one last year, and he had 4 interceptions in those 2 games, 3 in last year alone against Ottawa. So you're almost tempting fate at that point. But really no turnovers at all in the game. But then you had the fumble return for a touchdown. Calgary fumbled the ball to the Argonauts, and it was 100 plus yard. It was like 109 yards, I think, or something like that. Touchdown return for the Argos, and that was the first turnover. Pardon me, and the second one was that pick in the end zone to end it. So there weren't many turnovers in the game, but that was the only interception on the evening. But yeah, it was a big one by Bo Levi Mitchell, and I mean, he's a tremendous quarterback, great regular season record. He's like 50-10-2 in the regular season. He's like 5-4 or something like that in the playoffs too. So he's been a very great quarterback in this league. However, now 1-2 in Grey Cup games. And maybe even could have lost that one that he won against Hamilton back in 2014. But, yeah, so he just doesn't seem to be the guy right now to get it done in big games. Ricky Ray's the exact opposite, you know. I mean, he's played in like 4 of these now, and he's won 3 of them. So Ricky Ray was once again proved to be a big-time game performer. Not an outstanding day, 297 yards and 1 touchdown, but no turnovers. That's the big thing. Ricky Ray was able to control the football and not give Calgary great opportunities to take advantage of his mistakes. In fact, a good 100 of those 297 yards came on one play on what went down as the longest touchdown pass in the history of the CFL. So pretty crazy game from a couple standpoints. You had the snow. You had a couple record-long plays, that fumble return, recovery for the touchdown. That was the longest one in CFL history. So a couple crazy plays in that football game, all surrounded by snow, and great halftime show made for what was pretty much a pretty good football game.
Okay, so we have Katy Perry in the States riding a Trojan horse, and then in Canada we have Shania Twain coming in on a sled of dogs in a onesie outfit, which I read that that's what that was. I thought it was just a sparkly outfit. But I have to say, it felt like she was lip syncing. I mean, I don't know if we're allowed to judge a Canadian icon, but there was just too many red flags that I had with the entire thing. She didn't seem like overly energetic, didn't do a whole lot on stage, really didn't sound good. And I mean, if we're ripping on Shania Twain, why not talk about that wild rendition of "Oh Canada" by like "Oh oh oh!" exclamation mark, exclamation mark, exclamation mark. I thought that was super weird. I don't know if that was like, okay, we're trying to be friendly and be fun as Canadians, but it was just awkward. You couldn't sing along with the anthem. They told you to sing at home. I was trying to follow it in my head, and I just didn't like it. Trev, what did you think about the whole everything that happened there, like entertainment-wise?
I didn't overly mind "Oh Canada" too much. I think they were trying to have some fun with the whole thing, and why not? You're doing
National anthem.
Yeah, but it's not. I mean, they sung it, and they sung lyric after lyric correctly. So I don't get what's the big deal with doing anything before it starts. But I mean, really, you're just trying to get everybody to sing it, and I like the idea, and I like the fun they had with it. I mean, that was also very Canadian, and doing it with like one guitar playing. That was very Canadian of them there as well. But and with the halftime show and lip syncing, if she was indeed lip syncing, it's not too surprising because. Well, first off, you don't want anything to go wrong, and that helps make sure nothing goes wrong, especially given the weather, the fact that it's snowing as much as it was during the halftime show. And so I think it makes sense, given the weather, that things are more likely to go wrong. And so if you're lip syncing, it just means that chances are things will, there's less of a chance of something happening that would screw it up and make for an embarrassing moment on live TV. Let's put it that way. It happens down in the States. It happens up here. Why? Because you don't want mistakes.
Very true. So, we're a place that mistakes never happen. Down in the NFL, that was an interesting time. The Cowboys are still on a free fall, losing to the Chargers 28-6. And then, if you're looking over at the Broncos-Raiders game, you have Aqib Talib and Michael Crabtree wanting to beat the crap out of each other because Aqib Talib decided to rip off the chain of Michael Crabtree. Trevor, can you give me a bit more of an inside scoop on what in the world is going on over there?
Yeah, apparently Aqib Talib's barking up the wrong tree, but yeah, there's been some chain grabbing last couple of times these two teams have played, and eventually somebody's going to take offense to that, and so they had a little brouhaha. Both got ejected from the game. Another player got ejected too for shoving an official, and what people are calling a brawl, but it wasn't a crazy brawl. A couple punches thrown. Now the really interesting thing is they're now looking at video. They believe Michael Crabtree, I believe Suda, was on like a prior play, threw a punch at a defender at one point, and so officials missed it at the time. But I think they're going back looking at the video, and we might not have anything suspension-wise unless that turns into something that could have Michael Crabtree suspended. So they kind of got their punishment for the game for acting up. They were booted from the game, so... Nothing too crazy. It is kind of funny that this is over kind of grabbing somebody's chain, but I don't know why you'd want to do that in the first place. But now Aqib Talib has a couple chains, and so that aren't originally his, and Michael Crabtree is not very happy about it.
What a time. Now, over in New York Jet territory, they were taking on the Carolina Panthers, and Josh McCown's the quarterback. And, he was one of the guys who played for the Browns and at one point was, the leading receiving yards for a quarterback. And he had 3 touchdowns in this game, 0 interceptions, 307 yards. But the amount of penalties that New York got over, roughing the passer and really stupid things. And yes, you know what? I get it. Nobody really likes Cam Newton that much. But if you're the New York Jets and you were, the laughing stock of the league last year and you're looking you're kind of a contender this year, but you're shooting yourself in the foot, what do you do moving forward?
Oh, you stopped taking dumb penalties, first and foremost. This was a game they had a very big chance to win, and the Jets are a team that really aren't going anywhere now. I mean, 4-7 is at the point they're at. It's you're starting to look towards next year when it comes to contending, and so they are a team though that to a degree has surprised this year, and Josh McCown has shown up and played well, and they have to figure out what exactly is happening with that offense. That defense, for the most part, kind of impressed me. With that being said, Carolina still put up 35 points, but it wasn't a bad defensive effort from the Jets. They have to figure out what's going on that offense, even though they did put up 27 points, because Josh McCown seems like he can be the kind of quarterback that can't necessarily lead you into a playoff spot. He's like an average quarterback, and it's going to result in an average team. They don't have any outstanding pass catchers or anything like that, and their running game is in flux. We all thought Bilal Powell would eventually break out behind Matt Forte, and that hasn't happened yet. Bilal Powell hasn't really even been given too much of an opportunity to try to break out in that backfield. So the Jets are kind of an interesting situation in that offense, but yeah, I mean, it's another season eventually that's probably going to end up wanting to be forgot by Jets fans 5 years from now. So for the Jets, it's time to start regrouping and thinking about next year.
You're listening to BSS Sports on 91X with Trevor, Struthers, and Stephen Schill. Now, if we're looking at the standings for the NFL, the weirdest division, I guess you'll say, is the South right now, with the Tennessee Titans and the Jacksonville Jaguars leading that, tied at 7-4, followed by Houston Texans, who have lost Deshaun Watson, and then Indianapolis Colts, who obviously don't have Andrew Luck, and they traded with the Patriots to get Jacoby Brissett. But the fact that the Tennessee Titans and the Jacksonville Jaguars are leading the conference right now, is that a problem?
Not necessarily. Tennessee has been interesting all year because they feel like a team that, and I mean, they just beat Indianapolis this week, but they seem like a team that at times, in a certain week will look good. And it's the same thing with Marcus Mariota, the quarterback. I mean, I don't know, one week he'll look good, the next week he won't. And, I mean, they found a way to put themselves in contention in what's, for the most part, a pretty weak division. I mean, if it wasn't for Jacksonville looking as good as they have so far this year, and they took a loss the other day to Arizona. But if it wasn't for Jacksonville looking as good as they have so far this year, I mean, once again, that would be a division that would be in flux for like a 500 team to potentially win. So, I mean, really, it's one of those divisions where it's just, I mean, Indianapolis is a weak team. It's a weak division, but, I mean, Jacksonville, with that being said, Jacksonville, they say defense can win championships, and Jacksonville is the best defense in the NFL, in my opinion. And so they have a chance come playoff time if Jacksonville's able to hold on to that division to make some noise. And you never know what can happen when you got a great defense in the playoffs. Although, I mean, there have been quarterbacks like Blake Bortles to play for a Super Bowl. It's just hard to imagine a quarterback like Blake Bortles, Blake Bortles specifically playing in a Super Bowl.
Now, moving on to the NHL, because this is going to be our last topic of the day, because it's a big old doozy one, because it's the Ottawa Senators and obviously Belleville Senators, him and Han over here. Matt Duchene finally scoring a goal for the Senators, but they still lose, and now the Senators are on a 6-game losing streak, and this trade, I get that it's early with it, is looking absolutely terrible for the Senators. Trevor, what's your take on Duchene finally netting one?
Yeah, it took some time, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that he's coming into, I mean, he's played under Guy Boucher previously, but I mean, he's going in now to Ottawa and playing under a new system, so it takes all kinds of adjusting to do when you're thrown into a defensive system like the Ottawa Senators. But I mean, Duchene's the kind of player that may take some time, but he'll get it down, and he was eventually able to score his first goal, his first point, I believe, as well with the Ottawa Senators. So, yeah, Matt Duchene, it was a bit of a slow start, but he's going to start to pick things up. It's been a rough skid for Ottawa since their 2-game sweep over Colorado and Sweden. So haven't won a game since, but I mean, they have a big one coming up on Wednesday in Montreal. Bit of a preview of what's going to be coming up next month with the outdoor game at the exact place where they had the Grey Cup this year, actually. So in Ottawa at Lansdowne Park. So Yeah, Matt Duchene has a chance here to try to turn things around, and if he gets going, it wouldn't be surprising, obviously, if the Senators team gets going. I mean, Matt Duchene was brought in to be an offensive spark. There's no doubt about that for a team that has struggled a lot at times offensively. And last game for Ottawa against the Islanders, it was exactly that. They struggled offensively, got a good defensive and goaltending effort, and they have a great defensive system, but you got to find a way to put the puck in the net to win some hockey games.
Final thing real quickly, Thomas Chabot is consistently being sent up and then brought back down, and sent up and brought back down, but yet is becoming scratched by the Senators when he is getting called up. What in the world are they doing with him?
It's a good question. I mean, I think obviously the best spot is for him to be down in Belleville logging nearly, 20, 30 minutes a game, because he's just not getting that in the NHL. And like you mentioned, he was scratched on Saturday. So, sometimes you'll even find yourself out of the lineup up with the big club. I think they're having an issue trying to find a spot for him. And that's always the big thing with young defensemen. It's hard to find a spot in the NHL until they feel like, you're especially when you're, a defenseman that's could be a potential number one, number two guy like a Thomas Chabot, So it's hard to find a spot until you're actually at that level. And so now they've sent him back to Belleville. Belleville actually has a nice influx of players coming back. Colorado just sent Andrew Hammond back to Belleville on loan again. So they're going to have a few goaltenders now that they still have Taylor and Drager, and now they're getting Hammond back. And Nick Paul was sent back, as well as Thomas Chabot. So all of a sudden, the cupboards are full here for Belleville. So let's see if they can go on a nice run. Bit of a disappointing road trip that Belleville's now coming off of. A couple games in Charlotte, they're able to win one of those. And they played a close game at the Air Canada Centre against the Marlies on Saturday, but ended up falling short in the shootout. And then obviously, the other day they got beat 5-1 by the Marlies at Ricoh Coliseum, the actual home of the Marlies. So tough losses there. They got to play the Marlies again on the 1st of December at the Yardman. Game's nearly sold out. So if you want tickets, you haven't got them yet, you're gonna have to find a way to get some. I had a look. There's basically no seats next to each other left. It's all single seats. So it's going to be an exciting atmosphere, though. I can tell you, December 1st at the Yardman for that Belleville Sens and Toronto Marlies game. But hopefully for the Belleville Sens fans, the Senators can get a better result than what they had the first two times they played the Marlies.
That's it for this edition of BSS Sports. Make sure to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at BSS Sports, archiving all of our works on YouTube at BSS Productions. For Trevor, Struthers, and myself, Stephen Schill, we'll catch you next Monday.